Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West and East, I suppose, since I've got the lovely Eleanor with me today again.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. And today we are reading, honestly, the most depressing Tolkien story of all times, Children
This
of
is one
Hurin.
of my favorite stories in the legendary
Really?
arena.
Okay. I really like it. I'll be honest, this is Tolkien's one attempt at something like, I guess we'd call it grimdark or sword and sorcery today. But he takes it up further than any other writer ever could.
Yeah.
Like, here's the funny thing. Robert E. Howard, the kind of Tolkien of the US, he
Mm-hmm.
wrote very dark stuff. But what's funny with him is he liked to end it on a happily ever after, or like a happy ending at the end. Like you'd have all
Mm-hmm.
this horror stuff, you'd have all this dark stuff. Then he just has like Conan just dip the girl, kiss her, and story over. Or like the final Conan story ends with Conan marrying the love of his life, Zenobia. Tolkien, you're not getting that. And it's just really funny. But here's where I find that now Conan is more like Howard's Aragorn, but um, there's a contrast between Turin Turambar and say Conan. Conan is a man who doesn't listen to others and their prophecies and whatnot a lot of the time. He sometimes does, but he usually doesn't. He just does what he wants and what he thinks is best. But the thing is, um, that Turin, it's almost like Turin thinks he's Conan, but he's LARPing, I think is the term, and he's just failing at it because there can only be one Conan. But the awesome thing about Turin as a character is that
Sorry, your
he.
internet is kind of off.
Okay, 1 second.
The camera and your internet.
All right, I'll switch off the camera for now. Turin is someone who is, how shall I put it? He's very much a unique character. He's Tolkien's most tragic hero. And
Yeah.
he's someone who, no matter how hard he tries, everything he does ends in failure. In this
Yeah.
regard, one can see the Kalevala's influence and that of Sigurdur from Norse mythology. Sigurdur is basically the Achilles and Heracles put together of Norse mythology. But everything he does ends in failure because he chooses the wrong woman. Because he's basically, he marries one woman, then he later drinks a potion that makes him forget her, marries a witch, and then he gets himself killed. But his failures end when he accepts that drink when he shouldn't have, and doesn't stay loyal to his actual wife. So this is the thing. Turin is I don't want to say like it's an expansion of these failures, of these tragedies. And I know Lexi, Girl Next Gondor, doesn't like talking about Turin because
Why?
she finds
You didn't
him
like
too
him?
tragic. No, she loves him apparently, but the problem is she's like, I have to make fun of him, she said, otherwise I'm going to cry because it's just
Yeah.
too sad.
Yes, I understand that. The story
Mm,
is too depressed to read. It's a
mm,
it's a good story, but it's too depressed whenever you read it. So probably that happened.
yeah. And I'll admit, this was I first read The Hobbit at 11. Then I didn't read any Tolkien till I was 26. This was the first story I read at 26 years old, and I absolutely loved it. Then I went on to read Lord of the Rings, then the Silmarillion. Then I reread the Silmarillion as soon as I finished it. Then I reread it again because I had to read it 3 times back to back because I don't know, I just fell in love. But this story was one of them that helped me fall in love. And the story begins with Hador Goldenhead, who was a lord of the Edain, and he was apparently an elf friend or beloved by the Eldar, as it's put. And um, he was a servant or a vassal, we should say, of Fingolfin, which, you know, vassals and lords have very personal relationships wherein you own the land or you're leading the tribe that lives on those lands, that you are a personal, you're a sworn man, like a sworn knight or warrior who owes allegiance to the next guy up, which is usually the king. So in this case, he's sworn to Fingolfin as his uh, warrior servant or knight or chieftain. He's a vassal. I only explain this because I've recently realized that a lot of my listeners don't know what a king does or what the vassal and liege lord relationship is like. It's very personal, but the personal and the professional were interwoven together in medieval and ancient times. And this is true throughout all of Asia and all of Europe. And like the difference, for example, in let's say China and Korea was that the you had rich landowners, but if they wanted an official position as a governor of an entire province, they had to be appointed by the emperor. This is totally different from Europe and Japan, where the landowners eventually it became inherited and they controlled their own county or province.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, though, in some countries, the lord was strong enough to remove someone from that position and appoint someone else. It varies from region to region and country to country. And in Fingolfin's case, it's the ideal lord or king and vassal relationship. Now, the region that Hador lords over in Hithlum is called Dorlomin, and his daughter Glorithel was married to Haldir, son of Halmir, who was a lord of Brethil. And at the same feast that Galdor the Tall married Hareth, the daughter of Halmir. So Galdor and Hareth would have two sons, Hurin and Huor. Hurin was 3 years older, but was shorter. And he apparently took after his mother in this regard. But he was apparently strong, fiery, charismatic, and just generally Prince Charming. He was just, kind of perfect. Huor, though, was tall, like really tall. Only his son was taller than him. And the thing is, Huor, though, had more energy and vitality within him. Hurin, I mean. But Hurin would marry Morwen, which is when his troubles started. Sorry if I word it that way, but
sorry, your voice is a little bit off.
Okay, sorry about that.
I can't understand what you're talking about.
No problem. I'll repeat that. Thanks for letting me know. Well, Hurin was the one who was the most. He had the greatest endurance, the greatest vitality of his people, and was generally the greatest of his generation. But he unfortunately married Morwen, the daughter of Beragund, son of Bregalus of the house of Beor. And I say unfortunately because while she was very beautiful enough to be called Elethwyn, the Elven Fair, she was stern, proud, and just otherwise a walking, talking disaster. I don't know, like, I shouldn't bash her too hard, but she's the kind of woman I've actually dated, and I wish I hadn't, to be quite honest. Proud, old, and just generally unlikable. Boy, my youth was ill spent. But the thing about her is that her son would inherit her mood, and even her daughter to an extent. And this is not good, because as we'll soon see. But now, apparently, she was naturally prone to melancholy because of the tragedies that hounded her family. and she came as an exile to Dorloman from Dorthonion after the Battle of Bracolac, the Battle of Sudden Flame. And Turin is the eldest child between Hurin and Morwen.
Mm-hmm.
And he's born, interestingly, in the same year that Baron encounters Luthien Tenuviel.
Yeah.
That's pretty auspicious.
I think Tolkien is, making this comparison between Baron and Turin intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
because
Oh, absolutely.
he mentioned these two events together in one sentence.
Yep. He's
Yeah.
definitely drawing a similarity. Um, I think we're supposed to see also a similarity between, uh, or a contrast between Morwen and Hurin with Baron and
Yeah.
Luthien, where
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a dark
Sure.
mirror. Um,
Mm,
but um, but I think that um, there's also a comparison between Turin and them. And Turin would arguably live his entire life under the shadow of um, Baron. And even his elder foster sister, Luthien. And I dare
mm-hmm.
say, I think it very likely Turin did meet them. The only
Yeah.
reason I think that would
Totally.
be likely would be, yeah, because he was adopted or fostered into the family of Thingol. So,
Mm,
he has to have met the couple at some point. But this probably only contrasted his mood further because, it would, I think, inform his choices in that he'd be thinking, well, Baron's like me, I gotta be as great or greater than him. And the
mhm.
problem is he keeps trying and he doesn't succeed. He's too
Yeah.
headstrong. Um, and but the thing is, like, arguably, I think Baron was a failure early on, but Baron learned to succeed by using rationality, like, good reason and judgment, and um, learning, listening to good counsel, and combining that with his headstrong nature. So, like, a man should be decisive and headstrong, but should also be someone who is wise, like Elrond or Aragorn, or even Gandalf. And I even think Boromir has some wisdom about him and can
Mm-hmm.
look at a situation and judge it in a calm manner, like he does with rescuing the hobbits from the snow. It's him who looks at the situation and judges the halflings cannot endure much more of those heavy snows.
Mm-hmm.
Turin does not have these moments of judgment. He's all impulse and lack of self-control. And this is where he's very different from Baron. And of course, he has a younger sister called Erwin, or Lalaeth, which
Mm-hmm.
means laughter. Honestly, this part, like, this part just it's too much. It's really sad, and yet this was something that happened in the medieval period. Um, uh, the thing is, Huor weds Rhiann, the cousin of Morwen, uh, and um, this only has to be mentioned in passing because she's married to her husband for only 2 months before her husband goes off to the Nirnaya of Arnodiad, which we
Yeah.
spoke of last time. Uh, yeah. Now, um, the part that gets me is just um, the fate of Erwin. But we'll get to that in a minute. Um, uh, but the thing is, we go to the time Hurin and Huor spent in Gondolin, which I think we spoke of already.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Now, when Turin is
Oh,
5 years
sorry.
old,
My parents went home. I just need to greet them for a little bit.
okay, no problem.
Mm, but,
We'll just give her a minute.
let's go back to the book.
Okay.
Um,
All
they
right.
went to gondoling,
So
right? Okay.
yeah, we just got past that, and we are. Let me just check my notes. We got past the Baron and Luthien. We got past.
You have notes?
What have you? Yeah, I have entire half a page of notes
Oh my
just on this
god.
chapter. Usually, yeah, because I note down every detail in every chapter for these podcasts. Because I'm also going to be recording with Daniel later, probably this week, and I usually need a lot of notes for those. Um, because these podcasts just there's always so much detail in them, and I don't know what tangent we're going to go on. So often the notes also serve to ground me so that I know, after going off in one direction to, the last place, and that helps
Mhm.
me know which page we're at. Um, but that, and I'll be honest, there's stuff I forget about when I note it down, so I don't have to remember until the podcast. This is a trick I learned from when I was in university studying to be a historian, and um, and I've been applying the technique to my podcast with Dork Lord um, for the Lord of the Rings book, which
Yeah,
those chapters are monstrous. So there's so much detail. Anyways,
true.
yeah, Irwin or Liliath. I mean, darn that pronunciation. Would have hair like yellow lilies. It said, which just sounds beautiful. And of course, Nen Liliath would, as she's called, um, was the most beloved child of her household. Apparently,
Mm-hmm.
she was her parents' favorite. Turin was loved less than her, except by Sador, who's one of the house servants.
Mm-hmm.
But Sador is a cripple, and Turin would show him a lot of kindnesses and spend a lot of time with him, so that he was like a second father to the lonely Turin. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Although Turin apparently doted on his younger sister, and it's commented that he was slow to forget injustice or mockery, but he was very sudden and fierce by nature, but could be quick to pity and um, was often moved to tears due to sadness. But he was stern with others, like his mother. Um, Now, he didn't see as much of his father, but he saw a lot of his mother, whom he adored. And apparently, um, but yeah, we can already see what he's going to be like as an adult. And the picture is
Mm-hmm.
not a pretty one that's painted. Um, because he's a lot like Cole from Howard's Legendarium. And I'll get to Cole in a bit, but because there is a comparison now that I think about it to be made, because Cole was lonely, uh, was prone to melancholy, dark moods, and depression, and would never forget a slight, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like Hurin. But Cole succeeds because he has a friend, his sworn brother, kind of like Liu Bei and Gong Yu or something. He has a sworn
Mm-hmm.
brother who grounds him and reminds him to be patient and to forget the words of others, and who has a lot more wisdom in some ways. Brull, so that Howard made sure to have his kind of Turin character, but he combines him with a character who's um, able to bring out the best in him. So, and Cole later in his later stories learns from Brull. He has to open his mind and heart to what Brull is trying to teach him, so he learns to be a better leader and ruler and a better man. Whereas Turin never has a Brull, and this is a problem. Um, Now, apparently, there's a great sickness that comes out um, from the north, and we'll just. Oh, and I've just remembered. Um, Fingon,
Mm-hmm.
at least the first time that Turin sees an elf is Fingon, who rides
Yeah.
through Dorolman and passes over the bridge of Nen Lalaeth,
Yes.
which is pretty cool. And we can
It,
imagine,
yeah, you can imagine like it's that scene from the Lord of the Rings movies when Frodo and Sam watch a line of elves passing by.
yeah, it's exactly
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And they're described as glittering in silver and white.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that must be grand to see. But um,
Yeah,
Turin,
it must leave a great impression on him, on Turing. I
yeah,
mean, in his childhood.
yeah, it would. It would. It
Mhm.
would even leave an
Would.
effect on all the locals because this is basically the countryside.
Yeah.
Um, this is a farming community, really. And the thing is, Turin falls sick due to the evil breath, as it's called, which is I tend to think of it as like the Black Plague of the medieval period,
Mm-hmm.
and it passes along. Now, Turin has a fever and dark dreams, and then heals. And he was a very strong child. It's mentioned, but um, his nurse tells him to speak no more of Lilith, and that for tidings he should ask his mother. Which, yeah, and his mother is not maternal by nature, nor kindly. And she just tells him when he asks her where his sister has gone and why can't he ask or talk about her because he was apparently very close, she says, because Erwin is dead and laughter is stilled in this house. But you live, son of Morwen, and so does the enemy who has done this to us.
Oh my God, your voice is off now. Sorry, I
Okay.
can't hear.
Um, because
Okay,
Erwin
you're
is dead
back. Okay.
and laughter is stilled in this house. But you live,
Mm-hmm.
son of Morwen, and so does the enemy who has done this to us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can tell you that had my mother spoken to me like that as a child, that would leave quite the impression.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who would say things like that as a mother?
yeah. I can't imagine. Like I've seen mothers like that. Oddly enough, I
Mm.
have seen them, um, and they're just horrible. And I'm always left going, have you ever considered treating your child with a little affection?
Mm-hmm.
And like, ironically, um, the best mothers I've seen have been, ironically, in the more northern or Quebecois communities in Canada or in France or even in Japan, where the mothers just um, are very comforting, very kind to their children. But then you get Morwen, who's a case
You
unto
know,
herself.
most mother characters in Tolkien's writing are very kind and gentle, but Moen
Mhm.
is she seems a little bit different, right?
Yeah. Now she's grieving. It's
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that she's grieving hard, but she's grieving in silence and coldness,
Mm-hmm.
and she doesn't try to comfort her child. She never does. She just tells him, "Shut up and don't ever talk to me about this." It's like, yeah, she does not have a maternal bone in her body, and the thing is, I would argue, had Turin been raised with her, he would have turned out worse. Um, she's just if he's a walking disaster, she's a calamity. Um, um, Needless to say, I don't really like Morwen.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't like her. Um, I actually think Turin would have been better off had the Black Breath killed his mother. It would have done him a world of good. Um, but because he would have had to find a different maternal figure, and he probably would have clung tighter to someone like Melian, and that would have had a much more positive impact
Mm-hmm.
than Calamity Morwen. Um, but Hurin mourns and laments openly
Mm-hmm.
He would try to make a song of lamentation, but could not. Broke his harp and would lift his hands up towards the north, uh, crying out, "Marrer of Middle Earth, would that I might see you face to face, and mar you as my lord Fingolfin did." Um, so yeah, Hurin is never really the same, and Turin weeps bitterly by himself, and he's not allowed to even mention his sister's name to his mother,
Mm.
which I can only imagine the kind of trauma this would have upon Turin. Now, what's interesting is that this is somewhat based off of a what happened with one Roman family, because the first emperor of Rome, who well, first some call him second, but Augustus Caesar had an adoptive son, which was his nephew, the son of his sister. He adopted him, but this son died at like 20, and the boy's mother did not want to hear a mention of his name. She was so grief stricken. But
Mm-hmm.
when Rome's finest poet put him in one of his poems, like just the national epic, to kind of praise Marcellus, her son, she swooned and passed out. And she didn't like the song because, she was so grief stricken. But her brother really loved it, moved by it and he published it when he wasn't supposed to. As emperor, he ordered that the poem be published nationally so that everyone could listen to it. Because, yes, he was moved by grief. He felt that, um, you have to talk about these things. And his
Mm-hmm.
wife, when she would lose her son, because her husband and her well, he had adopted her son as well, Drusus. When her son Drusus died, who was a hers, um, the couple actually talked about his death and
Mm-hmm.
dealt with their. And they tried to. The problem, though, is they had the problem that they started telling people, "Well, this guy's not like Drusus. He's not." They put him too high. But
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand, their way of handling their grief was healthier. They dealt with it. They talked about it, and they managed it. And they learned to move past, or at least try to talk about it and not hide and suppress it. And
Mm-hmm.
where one historian in with one history textbook, I believe, mentioned that what Octavia, the mother of the first boy, did was freeze her life in a way. You know what I mean? Like she
Yeah.
extended her trauma, her period of mourning, so that she's
Mm-hmm.
trapped now in that cycle. She can't move past her grief because she's now paralyzed with it and within it. Whereas what her sister in law did by talking about it over and over again is she's forcing herself to confront her grief so that,
Mm-hmm.
eventually it's easier for her to talk about and think about him.
Yeah.
And I think that this shows a healthy mindset versus a not healthy mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very much, I think, what's going on here in that Morrowind, by forbidding it, is extending the period of suffering and grief of her son and
Yeah.
herself.
Yeah.
Even Hurin is acquiescing to this desire. It,
Mm-hmm.
needless to say, psychologically, it's not healthy. Um, and I also know from personal experience, because for about 3 years after my father passed, I forbade people from talking to me of him. But that wasn't very kind to them, and it just, crippled me with grief. But then I was basically told after a few years, you have to talk about him. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started doing that. I tried, and it I don't want to say like I'm over the loss because you
Mm-hmm.
never get over it, but it's you learn to live with it, the grief,
Yeah.
and you learn that you can't forbid people because they have to be able to talk about them because they're keeping the memory alive. And by
Yeah.
keeping the memory alive, the person lives on through you and in you. And this family doesn't learn that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's Tolkien's showing us with Aragorn how to manage grief and how to properly handle it. Like with how Aragorn handles the loss of his father, his mother, and whatnot. While with
Mm-hmm.
Turin, he's showing how not to deal with these sort of things.
Yeah.
But I laugh because you have to laugh to keep from crying. I guess Lexi has a point. But this is where Turin starts to turn more and more to Sador,
Mm-hmm.
one of the servants in the house. And he had been a woodsman and apparently mishandled his axe and cut off a part of his right foot, which, ow. I have an uncle who kind of did that.
Yeah,
But he
it's
meant,
very. I think it's very fascinating, right? Because we have talked about many battles in the past chapters in the Silmarillion, and this is the first case where a person accidentally cut himself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those, wow, okay, I didn't see that one coming. But yeah, like
Mm,
Labadal, Hoppafoot is what he's nicknamed, which
yeah.
um uh yeah. Now Sador doesn't mind it because it's given in pity and not scorn.
Mm-hmm.
Um but the interesting thing about Sador is after he becomes crippled, he learns carpentry and like becomes amazing at it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also a great storyteller. So he tells Turin all sorts of stories and even carves for him figures and toys so that we can see that Sador's kind of taking to him like a father would a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I find Sador one of the most magnificent characters in the Legendarium. I have to admit, he's
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorites. I really do like him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's monstrously tragic. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but um, but yeah, he ends up um, explaining, for example, that he fought in the Battle of Sudden Flame, and he
Mm-hmm.
went as a soldier, and that he says, "I was in Aethel Syrian, the great fort of the Elf Kings, for many years, or so it seemed now," and he still remembers the fort. He remembers what he calls when the Black King assailed it. And he remembers Galdor, Turin's grandfather, who was a captain, um, and who was the captain who guarded the fort when it was sieged uh, when the king was absent. Uh, because Fingolfin was suffering from a case of being dead and was too busy going off to die to Morgoth. Um, Now, apparently, what's funny is Hurin, for his part, took up the lordship when
Mm-hmm.
he had just become a man, and he, like we got a coming of age story right there because, um, and we also get a good idea of the distance between the Battle of Sudden Flame and this battle. In the Years of Men, it's actually probably 15 years or something, but amongst
Yeah.
the elves, it's like just um
A snap of fingers.
yeah, the wink of an eye. I was
Yes.
tripping over the sentence because I was thinking in French, comme un clin d'œil. But like I was trying to remember how to say it in English. Bloody English. It's as treacherous as Sauron or Saruman at times. I'm joking. Joking. Um, Now Sador um, would be the one that would answer all the questions the child had. Um, and he'd ask, like, was Lilith like an elf child? And
Mm-hmm.
Sador explains yes, and that many children amongst the elves and men seem close, but the children of men grow more swiftly, and their youth passes sooner. And he has to explain what is fate, which that's always a. Uh, I like his explanation. You must ask those that are wiser than Labadal, but as all can see, we weary soon and die, and by mischance many meet death even sooner. But the elves do not weary, and they do not die save by great hurt. From wounds and grief that would slay men, they may be healed. And even when their bodies are marred, they return again, some say. It is not so with us. And it's interesting that Turin can't talk about his sister with his family, but he can talk about her with Sador. And
Mm-hmm.
Sador just explains, she will not come back, but where she has gone, no man knows, or I do not. And Sador comments that it seems that the fathers of men fled from over the mountains. And it's rather similar to what happened with the Scythians, um, which were a vast empire in the ancient period, which were smashed. And a lot of them started coming over the Caucasus and westwards and became the Gauls and the Germanics. Well, they split into various tribes. I should mention that. And the tribes eventually became the countries of Spain, Germany, France, and whatnot. Um, so, like their westward journey is similar to that. Tolkien would have probably based some of that westward journey off that. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
historic theories about it. Oh, and interesting fun fact: the Scythian Empire extended all the way in the east, I think near to where China's borders are now. It's pretty cool. Um, just a fun little fact. But that empire's gone now. Um, so yeah, just a little bit of east meets west in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Turin is um, uh, is told about grief being a hone to hard mind, and uh, uh, which he basically says it makes you stronger. Like life isn't good, but the harder your life, the stronger you're supposed to become. And this is an important lesson from Tolkien. And if we think about it, look at the kind of life Tolkien endured early on. Like he
Mm-hmm.
lost his dad when he was young, lost his mother, Moses, and then lost his almost all his friends in La Bataille in World War One. So, like, if anyone knows this lesson, it would be John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. And like he endured.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd say Tolkien is rather like some of those elf kings he loved to write about. Um, but magnificent and great in a way few men could even dream of or compare with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and and we also get an interesting thing about the months of the year. Gwerin is one month that's mentioned. I don't actually know which month of the year that is. Um, but it's the first time Tolkien world builds a different month-based system than what we see in Lord of the Rings. So
Oh.
Gwerin is not. Actually, let me look this one up. I need to know. Um, I need to know about these strangers like me. Let me see. Maybe Tolkien. Okay, it's the third month of the year, so it's March. Okay, so the Ides of Gwerin, I'll say. I'm choking. That was a Roman history reference. Uh, but what's interesting is we also get the term the light in the west to refer to Amon, I believe, or the two trees. And Moses, Tolkien just packs the dialogue with so much world building and so much detail. And um, he even packs in at one point on page 46 of the paperback edition I have a little nod to, actually, I think he even slips in a Bible quote, which is kind of hard. Like it's easy to miss it, like.
Mhm.
Uh, but if things do go ill, I will not say to you, do not be afraid. Now, in the Bible, what you constantly hear, what you're constantly told is, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Um, like, I'm not trying to proselytize here. Like in the New Testament, Mary is told constantly by angels, do not be afraid. And, her husband Joseph gets very afraid because, when you're stepdad to a god or God, you're going to be a little nervous. And he gets very afraid and he's told, do not be afraid. And so you get these little Tolkien slipping in his religion here, where the Bible says, do not be afraid continuously. And Hurin says, I will not say to you, do not be afraid. For you fear what should be feared, and that only. And fear does not dismay you. But I say, do not wait. I shall return to you as I may, but do not wait. Now, Hurin's advice is the opposite of what we find men telling their wives in the Bible. The men tend to tell their wives, do not be afraid. Don't be scared. No, be decisive. Be brave. This is
Mhm.
what they tell their wives. And this is what God often tells men. Don't be afraid. Like he tells Abraham, he tells Joseph, he tells Jacob. Um, he tells everyone, like, don't be afraid.
Mhm.
Do not be afraid. And Hurin is what Hurin should say is do not be afraid. Um, and but he does give some good counsel because he says do not wait. And
Mhm.
he counsels go south, like just go. But Morwen doesn't when she should, and that's another problem. Um, she just doesn't listen. She's headstrong, and later we're gonna have an elf probably complain about it because he's got to put up with her. Um, yeah, that's much later. But the thing is, um, when it comes to um, when it comes to the two of them, uh, uh, well, Hurin makes um, and her start discussing Gondolin, and
Mhm.
she apparently has heard rumor that he's been there, and yeah, that doesn't. It's not a subject he's allowed to really talk about with her, and
Mhm.
um, uh, like apparently they look down on Turin during the night, and while he's asleep, he half wakes up but can't see their faces, which sounds a little scary. Um, honestly, I don't know about you, but I remember waking up in the night a few times as a child, uh, and looking for my parents or waking up to see them sitting beside me. My father would do that sometimes.
Oh my god.
Um, well, but
If
I'd
they
be able
were,
to see his face.
if they were in the darkness, that would be creepy.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
creepy. Like I was just going to contrast that with my experiences where I'd see my dad and it was a comfort because when I had a nightmare, he'd sit by my bed to if I wake up, I'd see
Mhm.
him and know I'm safe. And my dad would just pat my hand like just there while he's basically I think just reading a book or looking at me. I don't know what he was thinking. He was a man of deep thought, um, but he was also fairly lonely in life. So um, I don't know. But my mother would occasionally do this as well. But um, um, she preferred to keep busy, so I'd have to go out and seek her out. I don't know what it was like with you when you half woke up in the night, but I imagine your parents probably doted on you or kept nearby. Eleanor,
Hello?
yeah.
Hello?
When you woke up as a child?
Your voice,
Uh,
your voice is off. What are you saying?
I said, when you woke up as a child from nightmares, were your parents
Mhm.
often nearby?
Oh, I can't really remember.
Okay.
That was too long ago, but you know what? Whenever I read this sentence, Turing, his parents, looking down on him when he woke up, I always think I always think of this kind of image, which is really creepy,
Mm.
and it seems like a scene from some horror movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen horror movies that are actually like that, and I'm like, wow, okay. Now I enjoy horror movies, I love them,
Yeah,
but this is
if you
some
think about that way, yeah, if you think about this way, like if you wake up and you see your parents staring at you in the evening, in the night, in the darkness, and you will probably think, "Well, something happened, something serious happened." And I think, yeah, Turing,
yeah.
I don't know, it feels creepy.
Yeah, like, I contrast Turin's experience with my own. My own was something that would only happen when I had nightmares. My dad would sit nearby, I'd go back to sleep, and if I woke up again, he'd be there to comfort. But that's
Hmm.
very different from this, where you can't really see their faces.
Yeah.
It's like he's waking up into a nightmare, which really describes Turin's entire life. He's waking to a nightmare continuously, and
Creepy.
he's just yeah, it's creepy, but it's also so very, very tragic. Um,
Hmm.
I don't, I don't know how anyone can read Children of Hurin and not feel pity for him. And of
Yeah.
course, on his birthday, he gets a knife, and Turin's first thought is to give it to Sador. Sador um, recognizes that it is made of elven steel, and um, and what's interesting is that Morwen takes offense, um, and says, "Do you then scorn your father's gift?" And Turin just tells her, "No, but I love Sador, and I am sorry for him."
Hmm.
Um, and I like that Hurin just comments, "All three gifts were your own to give, Turin. Love, pity, and the knife the least." Which
Hmm.
I like it, but I also think, oh, come on. It's his to give. No need to draw a fence here. Um,
Mm.
and Morwen comments, "Yet I doubt if Sador deserves them. He is self-maimed by his own want of skill, and he is slow with his tasks, for he spends much time on trifles unbidden." Wow, lady, he's basically your son's nanny, and
Calm
you,
down.
yeah, it's like, wow. It's almost like she's got an ego about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, well, how come he likes him so much? Well, come on, like, you know, um, like if I someday have kids and they're like, well, I really like my uncle a lot, like my brother Daniel, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's fair. Dan's got a lot of good lessons to teach. But this is like, my gosh, lady, like you said, Eleanor, calm down, lady, calm down. It's
Hmm.
gonna be fine. Actually, I think this should be seen as a good moment for Turin. He's showing pity and compassion and whatnot, and it reminds me of a scene that was cut from the Star Wars Episode One movie, um,
Uh-huh.
but that's in the novelization, where Anakin Skywalker finds a wounded sand person, Tusken, who are barbarians. And what Anakin does is he saves this Tusken, cares for him, bandages his wounds, and waits by him throughout the night until the other Tuskens come along and rescue that Tusken. And
Hmm.
Anakin learns the value of kindness. But the tragedy is that about, what is it, like 13 years later or something, when his mother's tortured to death by sand people, he goes to save her because he's now a Jedi. I don't know if you've seen the movie, Episode Two, but
Yeah.
what he what he finds in the book is that the Tusken he had saved, who tortured and violated his mother. So Anakin realizes, it's it's like a moment of Turin. He, like, so that in the book it explains his mind can't cope with the fact that the person he showed compassion to ruined. It's one of the great tragic moments. that George Lucas intended to show in his story, but you have to read the expanded lore to realize, you know what I mean? Like, woof, this is the sort of thing that Turin is going to go for a few times, and it's like, wow, this actually breaks your mind. You go through these things, I think. And but the thing is, Hurin tells his son, an honest hand and a true heart may hew amiss, and the harm may be harder to bear than the work of a foe. So they're not at all happy. Oop, I cut out there. So
Yeah.
Turin's parents aren't happy. Turin makes a point of treating Sador with more compassion still. And a great chair for Hurin
Mm-hmm.
that he probably used that knife to make it.
Yeah.
That's my
Wait.
head.
Yeah. Wait. This sentence, Hurin is talking about that. Even if like you are with good intention, like you don't mean any harm, you will probably hurt. You will probably like use your knife with the wrong place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me the story of Balak, isn't it? The death of Balak.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's talking was like, how do I put this? He was setting up.
Self-referencing.
He was
Yeah.
setting up the narrative. Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And
And
there is a very interesting observation that I found online, that the children of Furin, that this story is very much focus is very much like focuses on characters not from noble families but commoners, like for example the Sador and all the outlaws follow in Turin afterward, after this later in the story, they are all commoners, like all not from noble families, and I think this is probably why I like this story very much, one of the reasons, because you know it really shows how Morgoth evil is not just pointed at those noble elves, but also everyone in this world. In this dark time after the war, everyone is suffering.
perfectly
Yeah.
said. Um, yeah, I love it because, well, how do I put it? I'm a peasant. I like to see what life of the like.
Mm-hmm.
We're not rich. We're peasants ourselves, Eleanor, and I've
Mm-hmm.
seen what status position would experience in the first age, and I can tell you, it's not pretty. The Shire, where peasants. They're going through a terrible time. And it's just astonishing to me, just the detail that
The detail what?
the details that Tolkien,
Mm-hmm.
not just into the world building, but the
Mm-hmm.
characters and
Yes.
showing, like that, like you said, Morgoth's cruelty is aimed not just at noble elves and royal elves, but peasants of elvish descent, such as Baelig, and
Yeah,
peasants
yeah,
of human descent. Now, I mentioned Baelig as a peasant because he's basically becomes a captain. He rises through
yeah.
merit and honor. And I have to admit, I wonder what Tolkien would have written if he had drawn inspiration also from Journey to the West and Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Genji Monogatari and other Asian classics. I wonder what he would have created and used that for his Legendarium. But oh well. But anyways, this story is very much from the Kalevala in the Finnish and Nordic canon of literature and mythology. And it's just, yeah. Now, we also get we get Hurin, who goes to depart on the road as Lord of Durloman to ride behind the banner of the king, and which is Fingon. And apparently the sun glitters with 50 blades as they leaped forth, and the court rings with the battle cry of the Adane of the north. Laco Kalad, Dragomon, Flame Light, Flee Night. But little do they know that they are casting aside the day for the night, I would argue. They are about to ride forth and into the night, leaving the dawn behind them. This was a heavy but fascinating chapter.
Yeah.
And like, for the life of me, I don't understand why publishers would be hissing like cats at this and not wanting to publish this. This is a great book. This is a great chapter. And each story is perfectly paced in the Silmarillion. And it's, oh man, this is such a great chapter. Let me see if I can get my.
It's a good introduction to the whole story. A good introduction chapter.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that we are introduced also to the day-to-day life, the cast of characters, but also certain ideas and themes, because Turin is the sort of person who shows compassion to the crippled, to the if we can make a comparison, I guess we can make one with Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars. They're both very, very compassionate to cripples and elderly people when they're about 9 years old. But what they're going to grow up into is a stark contrast to, okay, I have to shut off my camera, to, what they later are both failures. And the failure is not entirely their fault, but it also is due to very, very poor decision making. Now, the difference is that both of them grow up in the shadow of great men. Is basically the son of a great man of history, the greatest hero of that generation. Anakin's kind of a failure who is the son of a much better, wiser, stronger man who's greater in every way. And Turin is in the shadow of Thingol, Baron, and Hurin. So, and what's so interesting, I think, is that Turin aspires to greatness, those things aside. But what's interesting, I find, and I know people don't agree with me all that much, arguably Tuor is someone who is lesser than Turin. Tuor is not a great man. He's just a regular guy. But Tuor, the reason Tuor ends up being happier is because he's able to be content with what he has. He's able to look for a wife and be content with her. He doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Constantly seek trouble. He doesn't go look for trouble.
Yeah, I do feel like that, Turin, when Turin was raised in Doriath, and he seemed always like very depressed and very content. And
Mm-hmm.
when Thor was raised in Gondolin, and he was very concerned about, very happy about his life in general. So
Well,
basically, mm-hmm,
the other thing is Tor comes to um, Gondolin an adult, but he's raised by
mm-hmm,
elves, as you point out, and he's very content with them, even though he's
yes,
living on the run. I also think that um, we can make a comparison to an extent with Paris and Aeneas, who are two Greek heroes of mythology, of
mm-hmm,
Troy from the Trojan War. Turin, well, Paris is not content with his lot, and so he seeks out the love of the most beautiful woman alive, even though she's already married, Helen of Sparta, who becomes Helen of Troy. And this brings untold disaster upon the Trojans. He's not content with what he has, so he seeks out the love of a woman. And, like, sure, okay, he's a good husband to her, but, like, you know what I mean? It was not a wise match. While Aeneas seeks to marry someone below his station and just is, for the most part, contented with what he has.
mm-hmm,
And it's Aeneas who becomes the greater hero when he leads the survivors of Troy to Italy and founds a kingdom there, and you know, uh,
mm-hmm,
does, he works wonders really. In
mm-hmm,
contrast, I think Tolkien was drawing from these sources, also because the story of Gondolin is the exact same as Troy, and
mm-hmm.
it's the exact same. Like I thought he was actually trying to write his own Troy story, and I now realize he was in recent years because it's a great story. And this is where Tolkien is truly an amazing artist to combine all these different tales like Norse, Finnish, and Greek myths and legends and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, and bring them together. And what could actually, in hindsight, kind of see now that I think about it, not just Carolingian in the Third Age, but also Romance of the Three Kingdoms, because he did read the story, I think, in how Arnor splits in three. You have a War of the Three Kingdoms in a way,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is also similar to the situation of France, Lotharingie, and Germany in the medieval period for a brief time. So Tolkien here, you really see him demonstrate in this story his vast reserves and skills at storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but man, is it bloody depressing.
It's
um,
already depressing in the first chapter.
yeah, yeah. But um, I don't know if I have anything else to say about this chapter.
Yeah.
We'll resume with chapter
Mhm.
3 next time because we already basically did chapter 2.
Chapter 3,
Um,
we're going to talk about the conversation between Hurin and Morgoth, right?
yeah,
Basically, the curse itself, right? We have to explain what the curse is.
yep.
Chapter 3 is a short chapter. It's very short,
Let me see.
like one,
Uh,
two, 3 pages.
all right.
Okay.
Let me
Yeah.
check chapter 4, how long that is. Chapter
Chapter
4,
4. Chapter 4 is a little bit longer.
let me see. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if it's 3 pages, um, let me see. 11 pages. I think we can probably scratch out. Well, I actually think there's so much to cover in chapter 4. Maybe just
Mm-hmm.
chapter 3 is good because I'm just looking through chapter 4 and it's it's got a lot that goes on. But that's Tolkien for you. There's always so much going on. So yeah, we'll just cover chapter 3 for, if need be, a shorter episode, and move on to chapter 4 after that. How's
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah,
All
sure.
right. So I'm going to have to remember because I often forget to do this with YouTube. Sorry, bad habit. I'm going to try to remember to link to Eleanor's Instagram page where, you know, she covers conventions, she covers all sorts of you cover even ancient Greek fashion, which was really cool. You cover Tolkien, and you sometimes put on videos of conventions and pictures and whatnot. So if people love Tolkien, go follow Eleanor over on Instagram. I found it a fascinating resource, and it's really quite interesting what I would argue the Tolkien fan base in Asia is like. It's
Yeah,
just so fascinating to me, and
so I
it's
think
it, yeah, and this is something that, you know, like, it brings a great many people of Asia and Europe together. So, you know, there's value to be had here. So, anyways, check her out. And until next time, everyone, toodles.